Round 1, fight.
Hello there and welcome to VGC. My name is Chris Scullion and this is a preview of Capcom Fighting Collection 2. This is all running on the PS4 version of the game, running on a PS5. The game's out on the 16th of May. It contains 4 2D games and 4 3D games from kind of Capcom's history. And for this preview version, Capcom is only allowing us to show 3 of each, 3 2D games and 3 3D games. So let's get cracking. First, let's look at the 2D games. The first of these is Capcom vs SNK Millennium Fight 2000 Pro, which is quite a mouthful. Obviously, as the title suggests, the big deal here is that this is a crossover game where fighters from Capcom's games like Street Fighter and Darkstalkers, mostly Street Fighter, face off against fighters from SNK's games, so like King of Fighters, Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, Samurai Showdown, stuff like that. The game uses like a ratio system, so each character is given a value of 1 to 4, and you have to build a team that adds up to 4. So you could have like theoretically 4 rubbish guys who are all rated 1, or 2 decent ones like a 2 and a 2, or like one who's rated 3 backed up by like a rubbish one or something like that. You can also choose to fight with a Capcom groove or an SNK groove, which determines basically whether the combo meter is like Street Fighter Alpha or the King of Fighters. Capcom vs SNK came to arcades in 2000, and this is the pro version of that, so it came out the following year, and it added a couple of fighters. It added Joe from Fatal Fury and Dan from Street Fighter Alpha, and added some new moves for the existing characters and stuff. There were ports of Capcom vs SNK Pro released on the Dreamcast and the PS1 back in the day, but this is the first time the original arcade version of Capcom vs SNK Pro has ever been included in a home compilation, so that's quite a big deal. The same goes for Capcom vs SNK 2, Mark of the Millennium 2001, in case you needed an even longer title. This was obviously the sequel to Capcom vs SNK, and it's probably the one more people are familiar with in the West because it was released on the PS2 and the GameCube and the Xbox over here. First Capcom vs SNK had 35 characters, if you count the 2 that they added in Pro, but this one has 48, so they added new fighters from games like Final Fight and Rival Schools and The Last Blade. So the ratio system is back, but this time it's more flexible, so instead of each character being assigned their own value automatically, this time you choose your own team of up to 3 characters and decide for yourself which value they get, as long as it all adds up to 4. So you could pick 3 guys and say he's a 2, she's a 1, he's a 1, or you can just pick one guy and say he's a 4 and he's an absolute beast. That's just, you give them more flexibility in that sense of things. There's also now 6 different fighting grooves, which change things like the super meter and how you dash and how you guard cancel and stuff like that. And the fighting system has totally changed. So Capcom versus SNK only had 2 punches and 2 kicks, like you would get in SNK fighting games. And for the sequel, it's now the 3 punch and 3 kick system you get in Street Fighter games, so there's more moves there. Again, Capcom vs SNK 2 was ported to consoles, but this is the first time the original arcade version has been ported, has been re-released for home play. Next up is Street Fighter Alpha 3 Upper. Of all the games in this compilation, Street Fighter Alpha 3 is easily the one that's been ported and re-released the most times. Versions of Alpha 3 have been released on the PS1, the PSP, the Dreamcast, the Saturn, even the Game Boy Advance got one. And the arcade version of Alpha 3 was in stuff like Street Fighter Alpha Anthology and Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection. So basically, if you wanted to play Street Fighter Alpha 3, you'd have found a way to do it by now. That said, this is the improved version, so this is Street Fighter Alpha 3 Upper, which is a bit less common, especially the arcade version. This one adds DJ, Fei Long and T-Hawk from Super Street Fighter 2 as playable characters, as well as Evil Ryu and Shin Akuma, and even adds Guile, who amazingly hadn't made it into Street Fighter Alpha any of the 3 games by then, so he's in there now. Upper also tweaks the gameplay a wee bit with some balancing, especially there's 3 fighting styles, and the fighting style called V-ism people said was a bit too overpowered, so they nerfed that for Upper, making it a bit more of a balanced game. So some kind of fighting game fans say they prefer Upper rather than the standard Street Fighter Alpha 3 because it's a wee bit more balanced, so that's quite good. That's all for now in terms of the 2D fighting games. There's also Capcom Fighting Evolution, which we'll talk about next month, but for now let's move on to the 3D ones. We've got Plasma Sword Nightmare of Bilstein, or Bilstein if you prefer. This was known as Star Gladiator 2 in Japan, so obviously that means it's actually a sequel to Star Gladiator, so That's the sort of hard-hitting insight you get in VGC. This is a weapons-based fighting game. It's a wee bit like Soul Calibur, and it uses 4 buttons. So there's 2 buttons for a weapon attack, 1 button for a kick, and there's a dash button as well. The first Star Gladiator had ring outs, but this one uses endless stages instead, so you can just keep fighting forever. And basically, you can't spam someone with a cheap ring out. You've got to knock all their energy out. And the fighting system's been made to feel a lot more like Capcom's 2D fighting games. So there's this plasma gauge, which basically works like the super meter in Street Fighter games. You build it up and then you can do kind of super moves with it. Plasma Sword was ported to the Dreamcast, but again, this is the first time the arcade version has been re-released and made available on home systems. Capcom's obviously released a lot of 2D fighting games over the past few years, but 3D games, polygonal games, can sometimes be a wee bit iffy when they're emulated, but so far I've been really happy with how this one looks and feels. So it looks like Capcom's got the emulation down kind of pretty solid for its 3D titles. This includes Project Justice, another 3D Capcom fighting game, which is actually another sequel disguised as a standalone game. Project Justice is a sequel to Rival Schools, and like Rival Schools, it's a kind of team-based fighting game where you gather a group of school kids, not like that, and make them fight in tag team battles. Rival Schools had 2-on-2 fights, but Project Justice goes 3-on-3 instead, so you pick your 3 characters, and they don't all have to be from the same school, you can mix them up. And during the fight you can bring in one partner for a team-up attack where the 2 of you fight together, or you can bring both in for like a special party-up attack where like it's can do a lot of damage if you can pull it off. What's unique about Project Justice compared to the other games in this collection is it has a free mode and a story mode. So free mode is like any other Street Fighter game or other Capcom fighting game where you pick any 3 characters you want and you just work your way through a series of opponents like any arcade fighter. Story mode has you playing through a wee story with each of the schools in the game, meaning for each fight you've got a smaller pool of fighters to choose from. It's a fun wee way to help you get to know the characters a bit better, especially because they're not quite household names like the mob in Street Fighter are, so it's a fun wee twist. And finally, for now at least, there's Power Stone 2, which is the only game in Capcom Fighting Collection 2 that's got a free-for-all 4-player mode. Like the first Power Stone, which is also in this compilation, but I'm not allowed to show that yet. The combat here isn't on a flat plane, but instead it takes place in larger, kind of multi-layered areas where you're allowed to run around freely. The idea is that you grab pieces of the scenery and throw them at your opponents, and you can also find weapons like guns and swords to use as well. And there's also the Power Stones, which are these glowing gems, and if you can find 3 of those, you become really super powered for a limited time, can do lots of damage. The thing is, if you get hit hard enough, you can drop your Power Stones and someone else can steal them, so it's this constant mad kind of frenzy of people trying to get 3 stones before anyone else and getting punched in the back and dropping their stones, and it's kind of carnage. The first Power Stone was a one-on-one game, and the stages were all just kind of standalone levels, but Power Stone 2 is one-on-one because there's up to 4 players in it, and the stages evolve. So in this one you're seeing here, you start on a flying airship and then you fall to the ground at one point, and then when you land on the ground you keep fighting there, and you can jump in tanks and kind of vehicles and stuff, which is like crazy. Power Stone 2 was released on the Dreamcast and the PSP, but then that was it. So not only is it cool that this is the first time the arcade version has been re-released on home systems, it's also great that this is the first time any version of Power Stone at all has returned in like nearly 20 years. So I'm a big fan of Power Stone, so it's great to see both games back in this compilation. That's all for now. Like I say, as well as the 6 games I've shown here, there's also the original Power Stone and another 2D fighting game, Capcom Fighting Evolution, but those will have to wait until next month when Capcom Fighting Collection 2 gets its full review on VGC. Until then, thanks for watching. Please do your liking and subscribing like you're supposed to do on here on YouTube, and then visit videogameschronicle.com for more gaming goodness. Thanks guys, bye bye.